but I'm going to anyway. Be Jesus to all the people who need it now more than ever, I think, is the biggest takeaway of that video, and that the world sorely needs it. And so if the time for singing has come last week, today is then choosing how we shall live as we sing and what we sing about. But first, let me say good morning, everyone who is here in Albany, and good morning also to our friends in Lebanon who are joining us online today. And good morning to everyone else joining us online as well. It's wonderful to be here with you as we continue our series on uncommon wisdom. Last week, Pastor Alyssa talked to us about the deep poetic love found in the Song of Solomon. Today, we're going to shift our focus to the choices we make in our daily lives. These are the choices that shape who we are and how we live. These choices don't just impact us personally. They ripple throughout into our families, our communities, and even into our entire world. We pull up one thing. Let's begin with Proverbs 22, which Catherine just shared with us. The entire book of Proverbs is like a treasure trove of wisdom, offering us guidance on how to live a life that is pleasing to God and beneficial to others. Those two things right there really are the heart of discipleship, doing good works that are pleasing unto God and beneficial to others. This passage from Proverbs 22 emphasizes the value of a good name, the importance of integrity, and the blessings that come from generosity. I'm sure you all remember New Year's Day 2017. It was a Sunday, and I stood up here as a last-minute substitute for Pastor Kate, who was snowbound with her parents in Chicago. And we talked that day about Horatio Spafford. You remember that, right? Oh. Well, let's recap just a little bit. Horatio Spafford was a lifelong Presbyterian, nobody's perfect, as well as a successful lawyer and businessman in Chicago, known for his integrity and generosity. But then the Great Chicago Fire came along and destroyed much of his wealth. Horatio didn't waver in his commitment to others, though. He continued to support those in need, reflecting the teachings in Proverbs that a good name is more desirable than great riches. Now, you may more likely remember that I stood up here last month and told you about the time John Wesley was on a mission trip down in Georgia. Remember that one? Oh, good. Well, things didn't go as planned. If you weren't here that Sunday, I'll recap just a little bit. Things didn't go as planned for John Wesley down in Georgia on that trip. He faced numerous challenges and setbacks and failures that shook him to his very core. He found himself in a deep crisis of faith and confessed to a Moravian pastor named Peter Böhler, saying, "I have wandered away. My faith is so weak, I can't even preach." Böhler's response was simple, yet very profound. He said, "Preach faith until you have faith." I don't know if Horatio Spafford knew that story about John Wesley, but preaching faith until he felt faithful again is exactly what Horatio Spafford did. Now, if anyone deserved to lose all hope, it was Horatio Spafford, because the Great Fire wasn't the end of it for him. After the Chicago fire, he and his wife Anna planned a trip to Europe for rest and recuperation to try and put all that suffering behind them. But business delays forced Horatio to stay behind in Chicago, and he sent his family ahead without him. The French ship, named the SS Via du Havre, tragically collided with another vessel, and within 12 minutes it sank into the cold Atlantic waters. All four of Spafford's daughters, Annie, Maggie, Bessie, and Tanetta, were lost. His wife, Anna, was found barely alive, clinging to a piece of the wreckage. She later sent a haunting telegram back to her husband in Chicago, which read, "Saved alone, what shall I do?" When Horatio received the news, he was devastated. But instead of succumbing to despair, he immediately set sail to join his grieving wife. During the journey, the ship's captain called to Horatio to his cabin and informed him that they were passing over the very spot where his daughters had drowned. It was there, in the midst of his overwhelming grief, that Horatio Spafford wrote the hymn that would bring comfort to countless others. It is well with my soul. He understood that true wealth isn't found in material possessions, but in the legacy of faith, love, and peace we leave behind. In our own lives, we face choices every day that test our integrity and challenge our values. We live in a world that often prioritizes wealth, success, and status over kindness, generosity, and honesty. But Proverbs reminds us that what truly matters is how we are remembered, the legacy of our actions, our character, and our faith. Like Spafford, we can choose to live in a way that honors God and blesses others, even when life's storms threaten to overwhelm us. Psalm 125 offers us a powerful image of trust in God. It says, "Those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which cannot be moved, but abides forever." This psalm reassures us that when we place our trust in God, we are grounded in something eternal and unshakable, no matter what challenges we face. This trust doesn't come from a place of denial or avoidance of pain. Horatio Spafford's faith was deeply rooted in the reality of his grief, but it was also grounded in the assurance that God's presence was with him, even in the darkest moments. His trust in God didn't eliminate his suffering, but it did give him the strength to endure it and to find peace in the midst of it. This is how he chose to live. We too face moments in our lives when our trust in God is tested. Whether it's through personal loss, societal turmoil, or the challenges of daily life, we are called to stand firm in our faith like Mount Zion. Choosing to trust in God's protection doesn't mean we won't experience any pain or hardship, but it does mean that we are not alone, that we are held by a love that is stronger than any storm. Horatio Spafford's story challenges us to consider how we choose to live when life doesn't go as planned. Do we choose to allow our circumstances to shake our faith? Or do we, like Spafford, choose to trust in God's unchanging love? As we navigate the uncertainties of our world, let us remember the example of Horatio Spafford, who chose to proclaim, "It is well with my soul," even in the face of unimaginable loss. The Epistle of James in the Old Testament is known for its practical wisdom, urging believers to live out their faith in tangible ways. In James chapter 2, we are reminded that faith without works is dead. It's not simply enough to profess our faith. We must demonstrate it through our actions, particularly in choosing how we treat others, like the video taught us. Horatio Spafford's life was also a testament to this principle. After the loss of his daughters, Spafford and his wife could have withdrawn from the world, consumed by their grief. Instead, they chose to put their faith into action by moving to Jerusalem and founding a ministry that served the poor, orphaned, and sick. Their work was a living expression of the faith that James speaks of, a faith that doesn't just talk about love and compassion, but lives it out in service to others. In today's world, where we are often confronted by social injustices, political divisions, and the suffering of others, James's message is as relevant as ever. It's easy to say that we believe in helping those in need, but what are we actually doing to make a difference? Are we willing to step out of our comfort zones, to sacrifice our time, resources, and energy to serve others as the Spaffords did? Choosing how we shall live means choosing to let our faith guide our works. It means recognizing that our calls to worship are not just private convictions, but calls to action, like I talked about a couple months ago. Just as Horatio and Anna Spafford dedicated their lives to serving others in their time of greatest need, we are called to put our faith into action, to be the hands and feet of Christ in a world that desperately needs his love. But let's not overlook the emotional aspect of this call to action. Spafford's decision to serve others wasn't just an intellectual exercise. It was a deeply emotional and spiritual response to his pain. But by channeling his grief into service, he found healing and purpose. Likewise, our acts of faith are not just about duty. They are about healing, both for ourselves and for those we serve. The last scripture I want to talk about this morning comes from the Gospel of Mark, specifically Mark chapter 7, which shows us Jesus' ministry of compassion and healing. Jesus wasn't content to just stay within the comfortable boundaries of his own people. No, he crossed borders, broke barriers, and reached out to those who were often pushed to the margins of society. He healed the daughter of a Syro-Phoenician woman and opened the ears of a deaf man. These were radical acts of compassion, showing us that the love of God knows no limits. And isn't that the heart of the gospel? Jesus didn't just talk about love. He lived it. He embodied it in every action, every miracle, every encounter with the people who needed him most. Jesus didn't look at someone's background, their social status, or their worthiness. He looked at their need and responded with love and healing. That's the kind of radical compassion we're called to choose as followers of Christ. It's easy to love those who are like us, those who fit neatly into our worldviews, but what about those who challenge us? What about those who don't look, act, or think like us? Jesus calls us to reach out to them with the same love and compassion that he showed. And let's be real, this isn't easy. It takes courage, it takes strength, and yes, sometimes it even takes a good sense of humor. Because when you're stepping out of your comfort zone, when you're loving those on the margins who may not live the same way you do, there will be moments when all you can do is laugh at the absurdity of it all. And that's okay. Jesus didn't call us to a life of ease. He called us to a life of love. So what does it mean to choose how we shall live? It means making daily decisions that reflect our values and our faith. Horatio Spafford's story teaches us that even in the face of unimaginable loss, we can choose to live with integrity, trust in God, act on our faith, and bring healing to others. His life was a testament to the wisdom found in Proverbs, the trust described in Psalm 125, the active faith encouraged by James, and the compassion modeled by Jesus as recorded in Mark chapter 7. So in these times when the world feels divided and uncertain, our choices matter more than ever. They have the power to build bridges or deepen divides, to bring healing or to cause harm, to reflect God's love or spread fear and hatred. Choosing how we shall live is not just a personal decision. It's a decision that affects everyone around us. It's a decision that can change the world. Next Sunday, I'll be back up here one more time during this series as we talk about the personification of wisdom in Proverbs chapter 1 and how wisdom impacts the ways we choose to live. In preparation for that, as we leave here today, I want to challenge each of us to think about the choices we make. How are we living out our faith? How are we applying the wisdom of God in our daily lives? Let's choose to live with integrity, with compassion, and with a heart that seeks to honor God in all we do. Let's take inspiration from Horatio Spafford, who chose to live a life that reflected God's wisdom, even in the face of tragedy. May we be a people who don't just hear the word, but who live it out each and every day. And may our lives be a reflection of the uncommon wisdom that comes from walking in the ways of the Lord. Amen. Now you know we have to sing it. It's number 377 in the United Methodist Hymnal. The words will also be on the screen. Please stand if you'd like to stretch a bit as we sing, "It Is Well With My Soul."